uncertain. Heisenberg says, how relevant are the recent THX standards like Dominus ratings?
Worked there for a number of years, and then I was hired by Lucasfilm to start the home THX program, and did that for about 10 years. Worked on the design of hundreds and hundreds of different home cinema products, home theater products, and
Now, before we get into the acoustics and speaker placement, I did want to talk to you just a few minutes about that because I know when I interviewed you at CD a couple years ago, you mentioned that you helped pioneer some of the home THX stuff. So, what's can you tell us about like the products or what it is that you helped develop? Because that's pretty interesting to me.
um, yeah. So when I started at home THX in 1990, um, there were essentially no products. It was like it was an idea. It's like we've been doing this thing in the movie theaters for a while, and we want to take some of the concepts into essentially into the home cinema area. The home cinema, the term didn't even exist, but basically into the residential space. And so, first step was to figure out essentially what are the technologies going to be. So a guy called Tom Holman, the TH of THX, came up with the core technologies that say if you design speakers this way and you place them this way in a room and you feed them with a surround decoder that's got this post-processing series and everything is built to this certain level of quality and you tune it this particular way, when you sit down in this room you're actually going to hear the same thing that the sound director heard in the production space where the original film soundtrack was mixed. And I don't know, let me see if I have a slide that illustrates that concept. So the work of THX was essentially launched originally by George Lucas, saying, "Hey, I hear and see something in the final production space, either in what's called the mix room or in what's known as a screening room. Um, I see and hear something over here, and then when I go to the movie theaters out there, it sounds nothing like and looks nothing like what I saw that I intended for audiences to see and hear. What's up with that?" And he hired a guy called Tom Holman, who was a well-known audio engineer and also had worked in video. He actually started early in his career working with Henry Close on the early video displays and projectors. We're going back a long time here. So he hired Tom Holman to research, hey, um, why is it that when I go to this movie theater or that movie theater, the experience is not at all what I intended? And so Tom was like, well, because they're cheapskates, because they don't have the right gear. It's like, I don't want to know that. How do we fix it? So Tom spent a few years in research and figured out, okay, we need to launch a whole new set of speaker designs. We need to launch a new crossover for the speaker, sometimes known as the THX, the Tom Holman crossover.
Okay, I was
That's where
wondering
that comes
what that
from.
stood for.
And it's also a. It's funny. The project of that box was called the Tom Holman crossover, and George saw it, goes like, wait, that's the same name as the first movie I did, THX 1138, when I was in college. So it was
Hmm.
like, convergence of elements. It was like, this is cool. And so the idea at the time at Lucasfilm was, okay, let's just create this book of standards. It says, if you build a movie theater that's got this kind of speakers, this kind of acoustic, this kind of projector, this kind of screen, and it's all set up in this certain way. The surround speakers are here, all of these rule books, and you calibrate it this way. That will mean that movie theater will produce a picture and a sound that's similar to this, which is, I'd say, one of the world's preeminent screening rooms in a film studio. That's in Northern California, up the road from over here, at Skywalker Ranch. It's an amazing place to watch a movie. Unbelievably gorgeous, because the picture and sound are curated to the max by top level scientists that just know what they do to produce good picture and sound. So that was the idea of THX originally. Was we made this book of rules, and we've also had to make this piece of hardware that nobody had to be able to drive the speakers. And if you use these speakers from either JBL or Electro Voice, or like there's a few different ones, and you assemble them this way and you put them this way in the room, you do all the stuff and it all works and you follow the rules, you'll get a stamp that says you're THX certified. Yes, you'll pay a little bit of licensing money for that. And the audience is listening, as the logo often says. The audience will know, hey, if I go into this room, I'm going to have a better experience.
Interesting.
So that was the idea. Now, how do you take that into here? How do you take the audio video experience that you have either in the screening room or the mix stage, as it's known, the dubbing stage, and how do you bring it into a smaller room in the residential space? Well, Holman went to work and said, okay, well, the original mix is fine to play in here, but it's always a little too bright and it's a little mushy sounding compared to this and this thing and this thing. And he came up with a bunch of solutions that says, if you make a speaker this way for the fronts and a speaker that way for the surrounds and a speaker that way for the subwoofer, and you power it with an amplifier that can do this, and you drive it from a surround decoder that's got these signal processing features that allow to translate the inherent differences between what you hear in a big stage and what you hear in a small room that's 300, 400 square feet. If you do all of that, you can sit in this room and, you can have a Academy Award winning sound producer, designer, director sit in this room, play her movie, and they'll go, that's exactly what I heard and saw at the in the dubbing stage or in the main screening room at the studio. Okay, so in the case of THX, a basic surround decoder from a manufacturer would have a good quality surround decoder would have to have a series of signal processing features added to it. It would have to be built to a certain level of performance and quality before it could be certified. It got co-designed, it got tested, it got certified, and then it got put on the market. And I did that for several products, starting with a Lexicon CP3 was the first product out there, along with a product from Techniques.
Okay.
And then the list went on into many other manufacturers, all the way from high-end products from Krell all the way to things from Yamaha, like the whole range. And with the speakers had to have a certain directivity, a certain frequency response, a certain dispersion. All these different things had to be met. The subwoofers had to have a certain sound pressure level. The surround speakers had to have a certain dispersion. So all these different things that meant that when you put it all together, put it in the room, you go, wow, that sounds just like the dubbing stage.
Interesting. Fascinating. That's
Are these is the Stag Theater still THX certified, or is that not a thing anymore?
You could say that. The funny thing is, I don't know that it ever got, certified. I don't think anybody from management at THX wrote the actual certificate, because it's like, no, that's the reference environment. What we're trying to do is to make everything sound and look like that. What do you mean we have to certify that? And in fact, it would have actually cool if, I may be wrong, come to think of it, I think at the entrance of the Stag Theater's projection room, I think there was a THX logo. I don't remember, man. That was like more than a year ago. That's a good question, though.
Would you say that is THX still kind of a badge of quality in current speakers now, or does that not really matter anymore?
So in the case of consumer speakers, if you have a choice between a model and a brand that is THX certified and one that's not, what does that mean? Ultimately, what that means is the manufacturer has done their best effort to produce a good speaker, and an independent third party has verified it, has gone, I'm going to look at all the things you did. And as long as everything is done correctly, as long as the frequency response, the distortion, the dispersion, the impedance curves, all of the things that make a good speaker, which we're not going to talk about here. I have another completely other presentation on what makes a good speaker. All of those things are met, then you get a badge that says, yep, this independent third party has verified that it's good. Kind of like a UL listing on a product to just prove that you built something that's safe. So I would say it's worth it. And there's a bunch of manufacturers that have gone through the process and gotten tested. And if a consumer has a choice of one or the other, chances are it's sort of like this one is certified by an independent third party to work well. Doesn't mean that the other one doesn't work just as well, but nobody's looked at it.
Do you think that most speakers nowadays would pass a THX certification?
No.
Wow.
Really?
Okay.
There's still a lot of speakers with directivity that's quite uncontrolled, sound power response. It's not very smooth. Frequency responses that are not great. No, it wouldn't be.
Are their requirements as strict as they were back then, seeing as, we're seeing a lot of stuff like THX are making USB DACs for, computer products and stuff like that. Does that diminish
HDMI
the
cable.
brand, you think?
So that's an interesting marketing question. I would say that within the speaker and amp business, there's now 3 tiers. There's the high end, which is Dominus, I'll be back. And then there's there's the 2 other levels, Ultra and I forget the next one down.
Select.
Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Select. Thank
Select,
you.
yeah.
Glad you're here. I think I need a little more coffee. So what those different badges largely mean is a sound pressure level capability.
Yeah.
So a Select speaker sounds great, doesn't play as loud as an Ultra, which sounds great, doesn't play as loud as a Dominus. And all of them have a radiation pattern, all of the things that make a good sounding speaker are there.
Would you think that your speakers would pass the THX certification?
I'm pretty sure they would. They're
So-
they're built to meet and exceed those standards. And actually, the first speaker we made, the Alpha, which is the big bad boy, it's interestingly enough got THX tests and approved for movie theaters up to 300 seats. So big.
Wow.
And yeah, so they're built on those standards, which they just make
Right.
sense, which is a dispersion
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
correct, that's lighting up the room correctly, that's driving the sound power correctly, all these different things.
So this is uncertain. Heisenberg says, how relevant are the recent THX standards like Dominus rating? So I know you kind of touched on it already, but
Yeah.
Very relevant, very relevant, and relevant in that sense of knowing that I'm going to say essentially an unbiased third party has verified that there's no mistakes made anywhere in the design of the thing.